Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Sanjay, welcome to the podcast.
Guy, I'm so honored to be on your show.
It's fantastic. And I got to ask you, if you were on an aeroplane and you sat next to a stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
I would say I'm a documentary filmmaker, but I still don't feel comfortable saying that I am.
And the next question I'd have to ask you was, well, what kind of documentaries do you make?
They've been all over the place. Like my first film was on farm labor. My second film, 3100 Run and Become, was on like the ancestral, traditional, outlandishly long runs in the world. A film I'm working on right now is on the Native American food system. So I guess it's like food and running, then food. And my following film is going to be about running. So I guess there is a pattern.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's really interesting. Like, honestly, having a podcast, I get a lot of people making suggestions for guests coming through, regular listeners. I get people approaching me a lot, trying to say, can I come on, pitch an idea and that. And when your email landed, instantly I was like, oh my God, this looks amazing. This is so fascinating.
Oh,
So
very nice of you.
I deeply mean that. It was just, I'd never even heard of the race or the run, which I'd love to ask you, 3,100 Run and Become. So there's two questions that land for me instantly was, well, what the hell is that? And then the second question would probably, why make that movie?
So, it's really good timing. Here in the States, it's August 4th. And for the listeners that are watching on YouTube, the reason why I'm all glistening and sweaty is I just came back from the race course. So the 3,100-mile race was started in 1997 by an Indian spiritual teacher named Sri Chinmoy. People have to do 60 miles a day, a little less than 100 kilometers a day for 52 days in order to make it within the window. It's effectively 5,000 kilometers. So the course is actually a half mile, slightly less than a kilometer long loop around a high school in New York City. It's in the summer. So it seems like the worst location possible for an ultra endurance event because you're in the summer heat, you're on a sidewalk, there's no gorgeous scenery. But that said, there's plenty of people in the States that have run from San Francisco to New York.
Oh, wow.
And for those in the US, it's like, that if you go from San Francisco east, you have to cross 1, 2, 3 gigantic mountain ranges. And people tend to have to run on roads, and it's hard to get into a meditative flow. But in the 3,100-mile race, every half mile, people have access to water, to food, to aid, and there's no street traffic. So it tends to draw 8 to 15 people from around the world every year that are really looking for an opportunity to use running to transform their lives over those 52 days. And somehow, from what I've heard, it works.
I was going to say, well, the next question I got to ask you is, like, how does that transformation take place? What transformation are these runners looking for to do? It's a long, long run. It sounds crazy when you first hear it.
It's true. So that's why in our movie 3,100 Run and Become, we actually take viewers to 3 parts of the world, to the southwestern area of the United States, to the Navajo Nation. We spend time in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana and in the highlands of Japan outside Kyoto with 3 totally distinct communities that have been running for enlightenment for hundreds, if not, like the Bushmen, over 100,000 years. In a nutshell, the Navajo, for example, believe that running is a prayer. When you run, your feet are praying to Mother Earth. You're breathing in Father Sky. You're asking them for their blessings to become a better person. Running seems to be humanity's first religion, before we had anything organized. And when we were required to hunt for our food, doing long persistence hunts, chasing animals through the savannah, we developed a kind of cosmology around running. And it was pretty quick that people realized that running is a way energetically to connect yourself, not only with the outer world, with Mother Earth, but with, meditative states deep within you. And the 3100 is just a manifestation of that ancient reality.
Wow. And then so you're literally learning to, I'm guessing, transcend all the pain, all the difficulties, and almost rise above everything that's coming there and be in those states.
That's exactly it. You can't learn that during this race. And the best type of training is to come to the starting line, understanding how to minimize your problems, and not minimizing it with mind over matter, because that doesn't really work. Like, you have to transform the pain into joy. You have to be pulling joy from deep within yourself in order to really, like you said, transcend that idea of suffering.
Wow. And I'm guessing as well, right? Once you do a race like that, some of the problems that you have on a daily basis in normal life could seem quite trivial and small after an experience like that.
Yeah, you're right. And, I'm not saying this from a scientific standpoint, but, after a couple of days of fasting, for example, people find kind of a flush of energy. And, obviously now the science says that comes from burning fat and ketones and a different metabolic process. I've seen through this race, which has been going on for 23 years now, that there's a state in the human physiology where if you're running at a very low aerobic output, like these runners are running pretty slow. I mean, they do 60 to 70 miles, about 100 to 115 kilometers a day across 18 hours. So it's a mix of jogging, some running, some walking, but they enter into this physiological or metabolic state where recovery is happening through activity. At the same time, like, they're able, like you said, the mind melts. After a few days, when the mind realizes that it has to be out on that course for, 45, 50 more days, it kind of gives up resistance, the way you're trying to make your mind disappear in meditation. And when that resistance disappears, then the running itself becomes a meditation.
Incredible. Has anyone run it more than once?
Oh, so 2 days ago, the main character in my film, which we shot in 2016, a Finnish paper boy named Ashprihanal Aalto. In my movie, we show him finishing for the 14th edition, for the 14th time. And just a couple of days ago, he finished the race for a record-setting 15th time. And I just came back from the course, which is about a mile away from me in the borough of Queens. And a Slovakian gentleman who has towed the line, who has started the race 15 times, finished today for the 6th time. And that's really what got me to make this movie. When I first moved to New York, it was the summer when they started this race. And having been a miler and a track guy, I thought that distance was crazy. And it was only after I saw these people return year after year that I realized it's an experience of transformation and nothing else.
Incredible. So what inspired, so Sri Chinmoy set up the original race in 96, was it you said?
In 97.
On 97. So what inspired him to do that? And could you tell us a little bit about Sri?
So he was born in East India in the early 30s, and he spent his childhood and teenage years in an ashram in South India called the Sri Aurobindo Ashram. He came to New York in 1964 and really quickly started a kind of a larger kind of global mission with meditation centers all over the place. But in his youth, he was a decathlete, and the path that he was on, really connected the idea of inner peace and outer strength. That you could have a strong mind and a strong meditative life from combining those pursuits with physical fitness. And he was a musician. He was a very practiced meditator. But in the 70s, having lived in New York City, he became one of the central spiritual figures at the heart of the running boom. So you name it, like everyone from Aussie stars like Rob de Castella to American marathoners like Bill Rogers and Norwegian stars like Greta Waitz, all kind of, were in his milieu. And in 1977 and 1978, when the New York City Marathon started really gaining traction, the organizers would have Sri Chinmoy open the marathon with a moment of meditation. And his philosophy, really looked at running not just as a metaphoric way to like run towards nirvana or run towards the divine. He felt this kind of traditional ancestral connection as humans, that running really could help us connect our minds, our hearts, and our bodies with a much larger energy on Mother Earth.
Yeah, right. And now I do believe he was your mentor as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. I came across his philosophy when I was in college in California. But after I graduated, I moved to New York City to kind of, look at his path as like a graduate school for the inner life. And he was having us run races every weekend. He had a pretty organized marathon team that was organizing 6-day races, 10-day races, marathons, runs for peace. But in that summer that I moved here in 1997, that was the first edition of the 3,100 mile race. And now 22 years later, this summer is the 23rd edition. And we're getting close to the last couple of days. There's a Kiwi woman that's set to finish on the last day, Tuesday, August 6th, in the afternoon, really kind of cutting it down to the wire. But, there's been a lot of folks that, tend to come out to the race to really get, take a couple breaths of the experience of self-transcendence that these runners are having.
Yeah, right. And so what attracted you to running in the first place? And was Sri a running mentor, or was it more than that?
So I actually I ran in high school and in college, but by the time I was 18, 19, I was burned out of school. I was burned out of running so competitively, and I was really desperate to like have answers to life, which none of us really get from an academic setting. And so Sri Chinmoy was a traditional guru, and I went to meditation classes taught by his students. And it wasn't really till I met him and moved to New York that I realized that his path wasn't just about the inner life. It was really about the synthesis between the inner life and the outer life. And to have a really strong inner life in this day and age, you had to include your body in your heart's aspirations. You had to create goals for your body, and not just goals of like, hardly goals of like looking beautiful, but giving your body experiences of the self-transcendence of the progress that when we make, if we make that kind of progress in the inner life, we become happy. And it was spreading that sense of happiness to the body. So he started as my meditation teacher. And then I realized that his path, encompassed so much more than just that.
Yeah, okay. And have you, on your own personal journey, there's a couple of things. One thing is have you experienced that self-transcendence yourself, that experience to embody that?
So I can say that, embarrassingly, despite having been a student of his when he was on earth for, 13, 14 years and having run a lot then, I never had the experience of self-transcendence. I came from such a competitive background that it was really, it was impossible for me in that age, that era to like separate performance from my own journey. And it wasn't until I started making this film in 2015 and I met Sean Martin, a Navajo ultramarathoner, then met some of the Kalahari Bushmen, some of the running monks of Japan, that I realized self-transcendence is effectively, it's joy plus exertion. You can't have an experience of self-transcendence unless you're approaching the activity from the frame of mind of happiness and trying to find happiness that can only be measured by trying to enjoy each moment. For me, happiness, or at least a limited sense of happiness, only came if I won a race or like placed for a second or third. So it wasn't until the last few years that I understood what self-transcendence was. And then, I had a couple of experiences, that lasted 24, 30 hours in really long races that just blew my mind. I was effectively, and I'm saying this as having meditated now for 25 years, I was effectively in my highest meditation, like when you sit in silence forever. I was in that highest state of meditation and I was running. And it literally lasted, and on the last occasion, it lasted about 22 hours. I was in a 6-day race. And I couldn't shake it. And that's when I realized the truth of this idea of self-transcendence through running.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And do you think as well we can get caught up chasing that experience and actually miss the joy along the way?
Yeah. So like when I started thinking about like practical bits of advice that I wish I'd like absorbed years ago, when we do, you're a great athlete. Like when we do any type of sporting activity, whether it's yoga or whether it's running, very rarely are we actually present. It's obviously much easier in yoga than it is maybe in running or skiing or cycling. Many times when we're working out, even at the gym, it's like in our minds, the activity is over before we start. We're thinking about how many miles we're going to do, how many sets we're going to do. You're just ticking off boxes. The joy comes from finishing a set, finishing a mile. We're often plugged into like an iPhone and, really looking to push through the hour or two that we've allotted. And I've learned like I don't run with music anymore. And I literally try to just listen to my feet, effectively on Mother Earth. And the Navajo medicine man said, Mother Earth is under the sidewalk too. So like, don't worry if you can't run in canyons. So I try to literally listen to my feet and I try to consciously understand that I'm breathing in nature. We tend to think of ourselves as totally dissociated from nature unless we're in some kind of like outdoor cathedral, like a gorgeous park or like at the ocean. But Mother Earth is everywhere, obviously. Air is nature, sound is nature, sky is nature. And as long as those are around you, first of all, it means you're alive, but as long as those things are around you, you can be conscious of your relationship there. So my path in running now is literally trying to find joy in the moments. And I still race a lot. And I found that being much more present in my training makes the races actually enjoyable. Whereas prior, races were horrible and the only joy came from finishing.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's amazing. I want to raise because I remember I had some bullet points and I saw one saying about the marathon monks, and it said the real life Hunger Games. I was like, oh, what the hell is that about? And then I started looking into it, and that just blew my mind. So I thought you gotta talk about these guys a little bit, if that's okay.
I mean, we were really lucky in making 3,100 Run and Become. Obviously the race in New York is pretty accessible, but no one had filmed the Navajo ultramarathoners. Nobody recently had hunted with the Kalahari Bushmen. And there's an elusive sect of Buddhist monks outside the kind of ancient city of Kyoto, kind of like the spiritual center of Japan. And for the last 1,500 years, they choose one aspirant every 7 or 8 years to do 1,000 days of running. Now, everybody has to put their math hats on for a second. Those 1,000 days are split up into 10 100-day cycles. And so some years they just do one cycle of 100 days. Some years they do 2 cycles. Each day of each cycle has a set mileage. So in cycle 1, 2, and 3, the set mileage is around 11.2, 11.6 miles per day. And that's around a mountain loop through the forest, a single track trail that has an elevation change of about 1,000 meters. But by the time they get to the 7th and 8th and 9th cycles, they're doing 35 miles a day, which is effectively about 58 kilometers a day. In the last cycle, they're doing 56 miles a day, which is effectively about 92 kilometers a day. And here's the kicker. If they don't finish their mileage on any single day, they are required to take their lives. I mean, that's a pretty heavy responsibility. At the same time, to a lesser degree, like the 3,100, if you don't toe the starting line already with the capacity to find joy and use joy to propel you, you're not going to make it. And it's not like the marathon monks, as they're kind of affectionately or colloquially known. Nobody there is thinking about this consequence at all. They're using this as an experience of bliss. But they told me when I asked, what's the continued purpose of this final condition? Yeah. They said if we didn't have this type of ultimate condition, who knows? Now 1,500 years into the practice, maybe it would have gone from 1,000 days to 700 days to 600 days. Maybe somebody failed on the 300th day, and we would have said like, oh, give them a mulligan, give them a pass. Then everybody gets a pass, and the actual effort becomes diluted. Now, granted, no one has taken their lives in the last 150 or 200 years. They're much, much more selective about the people that they allow to do this undertaking. But it's heavy. It's literally, a prayerful trek every day for hours with the ultimate purpose of spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah, that's one serious commitment. It's incredible.
Yeah. I'm so glad that like the 3,100-mile runners don't have to string themselves up or stab themselves in the gut if they don't finish their daily mileage.
This blew my mind when I heard that. And was there an element of fasting that was involved in this?
Yeah, good memory.
Well?
So after the 6th cycle, with enough time to rest, the aspirant has to fast for 8.5 days. Now, for a lot of people, 8.5 days, is not a big deal. We've all done juice fasts or even water fasts, but this is no sleep for 8.5 days, no water for 8.5 days, no water. And they have to sit and chant 24 hours a day. And there's monks that are with them, sitting next to them, helping them chant. But it's said that by the 8.5 day, the 8th day, in 12 hours, the aspirant can actually hear the ash falling off of incense. And, on the kind of more physical side, they can smell food that's being cooked 3 or 4 miles away. They're given one thimbleful, about 1 ounce of water a day to rinse out their mouth so their cheeks don't stick to their gums permanently. But they've got to spit all that water out. And that basically takes them to the edge of the mortal coil. They're given 3, 4, 5, 6 months to recover. But apparently after that, once they start getting into the 55, 58 kilometers a day, the 92 kilometers a day, those efforts don't seem hard at all, because they basically conquered the idea of suffering on a physical level.
My God, that just seems so far removed from my life. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And did you meet people that have completed this?
Well, we followed one aspirant in his 9th cycle. And the monks there don't really let anybody follow these aspirants because, one slipped move by a cameraman, could sprain the ankle of an aspirant and really make his journey literally, life or death. So we got rare permission to spend a lot of time up there. And, we purposely didn't interact with the aspirant. We just kind of let him do his own thing. But I feel by following him and shooting him in a very cinematic way, we were able to really capture his journey without many words at all.
What a privilege.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, incredible. And you mentioned the tribe as well. So how did they incorporate running into their hunting?
So, traditionally it's believed that human beings survived on the savannah because of 2 reasons. Number one, when we stood up on 2 feet, we were the only animals that could run and breathe in different cycles. Like if a quadruped, extends its legs, it's automatically inhaling. And when the legs, push and come together, it's automatically exhaling. And so there's a lot of power from that type of breathing, but there's no endurance at all. Pardon me. So it said that, we could stand and breathe decoupled, but we could also carry water. What other animal besides a camel can carry water? There are none. So it said that, we evolved and became strong as a species by inventing this idea of a persistence hunt, carrying our own water, but chasing large game away from watering holes. And so that required a deep, intimate knowledge of the land. And you chase an animal, it would take off at, 60K an hour and run like 5 miles, and you track it. And then chase it again and chase it again and chase it again until after 2 days, it's struggling and suffering from dehydration. And, with no danger to oneself, you could approach the animal and shoot a poison arrow into it from 4 or 5 meters away. That said, we spent time with the Kalahari Bushmen, who are, some of the only people on Earth that are still practicing this persistence hunting. And they told us that their strength doesn't come from any evolutionary advantage. It doesn't come from, being able to track an animal. It doesn't come from being able to carry water. They know that when they move and they run, the power of prayer is what gives them the ultimate advantage over the animal. They say they're able to read the movements of the animal through intuition, which they glean from Mother Earth. They're able to make the final sprints because they're getting energy from their ancestors and energy from Mother Earth. That said, the sad reality in which we captured in the film is that the government of Botswana has made it illegal for Bushmen to hunt. Just like every other westernized, educated government on Earth, there's a very strong anti-indigenous bias. And so there's the same genocide that went on with the Aborigines 150 years ago, with Native Americans in the United States, 125 years ago, is happening right now in Botswana.
Wow. That's so sad. It's really interesting. It almost starts to make me feel how disconnected am I from nature and everything because of the Western lifestyle and technology, and we're so caught up in our external worlds constantly. And you think that we're all stressed and we never give ourselves time to be and start to experience these states.
I'm no expert, but what I've learned through this movie, and I live in New York City, is Mother Nature's everywhere. Like we were saying, like we are beings constantly surrounded by nature. We might not be surrounded by trees or by like rivers, and might not be like harvesting our own food, but we can have a relationship with Mother Earth if we approach Mother Earth with utmost humility. And it's an understanding that it's a privilege to be walking on Mother Earth. It's a privilege to be breathing in Father Sky. And there's no greater way to amplify that attitude in your life than to experience it while running.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. So somebody listening to this going, I love the idea of starting to experience this connection, this transcendence, but they don't run. Do we have to go out there and start running, or are there other practices that you would feel would help?
It depends on people's level of interest or fitness. Walking has always been a very important spiritual practice. I mean, if you can imagine how important the idea of pilgrimage was for tens of thousands of years, even in the more modern Judeo-Christian traditions, the idea of walking to holy places. In India, it's still very much, a part of like regular lifestyle. People make pilgrimages to Mecca, and that's the act of praying with one's feet. That's all it is. It's like, can you find an aspect of your life where you can combine movement and prayer? Obviously, there are some practices that combine both if done the right way, like yoga, but anything can be done with a prayerful consciousness. At the same time, it's like anything where we're relying on our breath, where you can get your heartbeat up a little bit more than our resting heartbeat, and really focus on breath and understanding that you're breathing in something cosmic. You're breathing in an element which connects every single earthly being. And, even animals under the sea have to breathe a form of oxygen. But that's as close to nature as you can get. You're breathing nature into your lungs.
Yeah, beautiful. And outside of the running, do you have a meditation practice, or is that your meditation?
I do.
You do.
I do. I do think it's really, really important to understand, what silencing the mind feels like. And that, as you know, I mean, you're an expert. As you know, it's like that's easy as done when you're just focusing on that.
Yeah.
Through a daily practice.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Now, I ask everyone a set of questions on the show, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on things. But one question is, what's been a low point in your life that's later been a blessing, or turned out to be a blessing?
I hate to put it this way, but like I don't remember low points, and I don't want to remember low points. like my philosophy, and this comes from my teacher, Sri Chinmoy, my philosophy is past is dust. You know, like each day is a new beginning. And it's like, I just try to be happy right now. And, you know, even if the most kind of like this, obviously it's like, there are things that kind of buffet you in life. And, you know, you're not always in the best kind of weather or eating the best types of meals inwardly or outwardly. Everyone kind of gets into a zone of darkness, but I don't want that. And I don't want suffering. I don't want to think about suffering. I don't want to think about past experiences of suffering. You know, I'm trying to find freedom from that from the negativity which is in me and which is around me. And to do that, it's like I strongly feel that anything that's not illuminating, anything that's not fulfilling, anything that when I think of it doesn't give me joy and happiness, I throw it away. And I did quip before, you know, the podcast started, that I've gained a lot of like insight through mistakes. But I don't look at mistakes as mistakes. I look at mistakes as experiences. I look at failures literally as opportunities. And I can find a sense of victory in all of these experiences just by changing my attitude towards them.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? The awareness to have the attitude is key though, right? You know,
yeah, but I see it in running, and I see it in the 3,100-mile race, because folks there get blisters every day. There's heat rash and chafing like you wouldn't believe. And if their mind's focused on those problems get amplified. I mean, we know that. It's like, you know, if you allow yourself to enjoy a moment of suffering, putting on like your Robert Smith Cure songs and all that stuff and like wallowing in it, you can't shake it off. You know, it's like, it just sticks, it grows, and it gets magnified. So I see that with running. It's a metaphor. It's like, you get a blister. Can you take care of it with some tape? Yeah. Is it going to kill you? No. Do you have to attend to it? Yeah. But then it's like, you have to like minimize it through joy. And I look at that as something I'm trying to practice to the best of my ability in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice. Do you think suffering is a choice?
Oh, well, you know, I probably would sound like the most arrogant person if I didn't really acknowledge the fact that a lot of people have experiences which are deeply bruising, which can affect us on the, like, you know, like death of loved ones, you know, like just dissolution of relationships that come in an unplanned, you know, like you know, unintended way. Like those experiences are brutal, and I definitely think that a part of a person dies during those really horrific experiences of suffering. But that said, it's like, we don't make progress through suffering. You know, I guarantee you, like, no one has made progress through the act of suffering. It's like we make progress but from negative experiences by moving past the suffering as quickly as we can and moving into that realm of awareness and insight and understanding our relationship with what just happened and how we want that event to affect our future. So I don't think suffering is the answer. I think it's something that we're all hit with. And some types of suffering are much more difficult to transcend than others, but the goal has to be transcendence.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And it's almost then being able to take the wisdom from the suffering that you've experienced and then apply that into your life to bring more happiness and peace and joy in.
Yeah, and like folks like you that coach people through those types of issues, you know, that really understand, you know, there's a formula for going beyond. And there's pathways for like learning to come to terms with your suffering, and then, you know, not allowing it to affect your sense of satisfaction in a day-to-day life.
Yeah, beautiful. What does your morning routine look like?
You know, I usually, you know, get up between, I don't know, I'm not super disciplined, but usually get up around 5:45, 5:50. I meditate in the morning. I don't try to set any records in the morning because I'm not a morning person. So I don't say like, I've got to meditate for an hour. I've got to meditate for 45 minutes. I meditate for as long as I'm able to be aware and awake, because I do not like going back to sleep after that meditation. So those meditations can be 15 minutes long. They can be 20 minutes long, but they give me the feeling, the refreshing feeling to start the day with a clear mind. And then, you know, I'm always working on something, whether it's a film or whether, you know, I'm helping out at a multi-day long distance race. So there's always work that pretty much starts at 7:30, 8 in the morning. And I'm lucky enough that I can pretty much set my own schedule. And, you know, I tend to work to some capacity, probably till 8 or 9 at night, but in a very healthy way, in a very measured way, with breaks and runs and other things. But, you know, I find that I'm much more fulfilled when I've got a lot of activity going on.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. If you could have dinner with anyone tonight from any time frame, anywhere in the world, past, present, who would it be, do you think, and why?
I mean, I love this conversation, so I would actually like to have dinner with you. We're so far away, and like we're just hanging out through, like, you know, a couple of headphone cords. So yeah, that's pretty much my answer. But if you want the kind of more like imaginative one, oh, you know, the people that I think that I would like to meet, like various saints and sages. You know, I think that I wouldn't be able to eat dinner. I think I'd like to like meditate with certain people. You know, I'd like to just bask in the glow. And if they see me just like scarfing down food, which I usually do, they might not want to give me a deeper experience. So yeah, it's like I'd love to meditate with a bunch of people. You know, Ramana Maharshi, Sri Aurobindo, Sri Ramakrishna, kind of modern Indian sages and saints. And if I had a chance to like eat a bowl of rice and some yogurt with them, that would be awesome.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And it makes me thinking about that. If I had heard that statement maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have connected at all, thinking, what the, why would you want to sit and meditate with someone? You know, like from somebody then that wasn't meditating. You know, it's such a, but now that somebody does have some quite profound experiences over time, it's just such a great thing to do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I live in New York, so it's like I have access to pretty cool people, pretty great food. I would like to run with certain people, but when those wishes have come true, like they've dusted me, and I haven't been able to like really enjoy the runs because I'm so much further behind than they are. So I choose my activities wisely.
Yeah. No, brilliant. With everything we covered today, is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
Oh, you know, it's at least for me, living in the States right now, it's really difficult to try to maintain a sense of positivity. And with climate change, with all these global issues, it's tough to figure out like what the future is going to look like, and that can be worrying. But you know, I don't disconnect myself from the world. I'm pretty up to date on stuff that's happening. But what I feel is like the most important thing for me is to be happy. I mean, it seems like it's totally selfish, but I know that when opportunities come to actually be of service to greater, more global issues, if I'm not in a good consciousness, if I'm not in a good frame of mind, you know, I'm not the right person. And I just try to cultivate the idea of being the best instrument I can, either to help a friend, to do something maybe a little bit bigger, to work on a bigger, more, you know, impactful documentary project. But I feel like it really begins with my own level of joy in life.
Yeah, wonderful. It's almost, I often think of just trying to be the example of myself that I would want to see in others. And the more I allow that to come through me and flow, the greater impact I seem to have on everything around you. You know,
That's a good piece of advice for me. Like I just came back from a fellow who finished a 3,100-mile race, and I was definitely agitated and squawking at people to get out of his way. So I will take your piece of advice and your reflection to heart.
So where can everyone watch the movie? Like, how can we go about getting it?
It depends on the country, but in most countries it's available on Amazon and on iTunes and on Google Play. It's kind of a slow rollout. There's some countries that we haven't quite hit yet, but that's because distribution is slow. But stay tuned, because we are going to be out everywhere in the next few months.
Awesome. 3,100 and become. Check it out.
Yes.
Definitely.
Thanks so much.
And you're on social media as well?
Yeah, you can follow this summer's race and all the things that happened at 3100 Film on Instagram,
Okay.
or myself at Mr. Sanjay R, my last, the initial of my last name.
Yeah.
Tend to bounce around, so it's not necessarily the most epic in terms of like action or like celebrities, but you know, I was in Montana last week. I was, on a Native American reservation a few weeks before, and I'm on the sidewalk of Queens today. So there's a good variation and variety.
No, totally. I was only saying off air, but just for everyone listening, I just started following you on Instagram. I just saw you in this amazing terrain running. I was like, oh, where in the world is he? So.
Yeah. I don't get opportunities, I'm not a kind of sponsored guy. I'm not really into like product placement in my movies, but there was this headphone company called JBird, and they were organizing a retreat, in this area that was carved by glaciers in the state of Montana on the border of the US and Canada. And it wasn't even so much about like getting free product, but Timothy Olson, one of the best ultra runners, Rich Roll, the podcast guy, and his wife Srimati, who's a vegan chef, Knox Robinson, a bunch of really eclectic people were gathered, and it was kind of embarrassing because we all stayed in yurts, and we went on runs, at 8,000, 9,000 feet, 25, 300, 3,000 meters. And we just got to experience some of the most gorgeous land that I've ever seen. And so it was there and gave me a good breath of fresh air from the sidewalk of Queens.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Sanjay, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And also thank you for bringing out this documentary and bringing this work to the attention of people, because I had no idea this went on. And
this whole film has been a great opportunity for me to meet with folks like you, connect with folks like you, and really get a chance to be a part of the lives of the great audiences that you've cultivated. So thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate it, mate. Thanks.
It's my pleasure and my honor. Thank you.